Now, since the launch of the 7 big wins as the short and medium-term priorities to grow Nigeria's oil and gas industry, the Ministry of Petroleum Resources has fast-tracked its action plans, holding a 2-day stakeholders consultation forum on the draft National Gas Policy and National Oil Policy in the nation's capital, Abuja. Well, joining me to talk about some of the issues raised at this forum is a senior technical advisor, Upstream and Gas, to the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Mite Adeniji. Mite, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning, Harriet.
It's been a very long week for you, particularly, especially as that forum had a lot of participants with so many issues hoping to be addressed. But talk to us a little bit more about what the Stakeholders Forum hopes to achieve.
What we were seeking to do, Harriet, was to ensure that that we had a policy sets that had consultations with the public, so that we will. I'm sorry, there's an echo going on here, so that's making it difficult for me.
Go ahead. I apologize. Mite, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, sure. Thanks. Right. So, firstly, as you rightly said, we had the 7 big wins approved by the president. We again opened it up to the public, but we needed to actually issue policy proposals to the industry and to other persons likely to be affected by the policies, and basically say, look, these are our thoughts around how we want to direct the industry going forward, and it will make sense to have your input. And our belief is that that really is the best way to govern any part of our economy, more so in a very foundational sector like the petroleum sector. And if you really think about it, there's a lot of knowledge, experience, expertise in the petroleum sector, and it just wouldn't have made sense for us to just go to cabinet and then finally come up with a set of policies and say, well, this is it, let's run with it like that. No, it was important that we had feedback from everyone in the industry, and once we have that feedback, the idea was basically to now refine the document, then propose it to the Federal Executive Council, right, for final review. And then they will now take a decision either way. Once that's done, then you can then get to a point where we now have a policy for the oil side of the sector, and then the policy driving the gas resources. And that will be the basis on which we can now move forward into legislation. And that basically was the whole idea.
So what were the main issues that were discussed by this participants? Because this isn't the first time that you have industry stakeholders sitting down at such a forum to raise the concerns that they have with regards to having a very strong, formidable industry. So what are the same issues that were raised?
Well, fundamentally, everyone's expectant around the issue of legislation. As you may know, we've been seeking to enact legislation around issues in the sector over the last 16 years. So there is certainly a heightened sense of expectation within the industry to see that we finally bed that issue. And we were able to give the assurance that that solution was literally imminent. Within a short period of time, the executive bill for the petroleum sector, which is the Petroleum Industry Reform Bill, will be out for the consideration again of the government, and then after which it will go to the legislature for consideration. As you know, there'll be a public forum, and again we'll go through the process of input from the entire industry around it. So that definitely was a big issue. Next point was the question of the fiscal policy, which we were able to respond that. We've gone through a whole series of consultation, of work around fiscal issues, and we're literally at the point where we're ready within the next week or so to issue the fiscal policy for consultation. Anything you see around those two policies that were considered this week has fiscal implications around them. And so that would definitely be open to the public shortly. Third point, and that was big, coming from the oil policy, is a desire on the government side to ensure that within a pretty short order we get to a point where we start looking at refining most of equity crude within the country. We must get to the point where we're not exporting crude in the way that we do, but see how we can actually get a refining sector, off the ground. And that's just not just refineries built and owned by the government, but we must try to encourage new investment, right, in the refining sector. And there's a huge amount of interest in this. So that was a big issue. Next point on the upstream was to see how we were able to get as much investment into the upstream. And you might have heard yesterday that there was an approval given around the issue of how we were basically going to get the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation off the treasury and have it been able to be funded, off the treasury. And I think that will help really, because you'd like to have in the coming quarter, a situation where there's going to be much more activity kicking off in the petroleum sector. Once we get to that point, you see a lot more investment coming in, and we're going to start looking to see how most of the issues that have been of concern in the last year or so, basically petering out.
So
I could tell you a lot more about the gas. There was a huge amount of interest in gas, massive interest, whether in the upstream and certainly in the midstream. The key concern of investors was how do we get gas around the country more. So there was discussions around investment in infrastructure, which is firstly the pipelines, but also in other delivery systems. So we have to start looking at compressed natural gas, mini LNG plants as an option, because certainly it does take a while to build a hard pipeline, but we must also try to encourage the development of the virtual pipeline systems. And so the question is, how do you encourage that to happen? And there was quite a lot of discussion around that.
So definitely. Well. So let me take you up on
encouraging.
The big
elephant in the room. That was the gas to power.
Let me take you up on encouraging the starting up of mini LNG plants. Of course, we have the Nigerian liquefied natural gas as the NLNG, and that's done so well in the last couple of years. So, encouraging mini NLNG plants, is it that the ministry will be looking at coming up with a policy to encourage this or incentives? Talk to us a little bit more about it.
Right. So I can put it well in context. The first point is this: understanding that there are abundant gas resources in the country, but our existing gas infrastructure network is limited. And therefore, there are many stranded industries dotted all over the country that don't have enough energy supplies. Now, you've had quite a number of very clever entrepreneurs come over saying, look, given the chance, we will build small LNG plants from which we would truck LNG to various off-takers around the country. And we know that can happen. So it is our interest and our intent to ensure that those entrepreneurs, and as many of them as possible, have access to gas resources. Secondly, through fiscal policy, which we are proposing. We want to see how we can basically put in some incentives to draw more of these investments into the country. Thirdly, we'll be relating with all the other sectors that are critical for this to happen, in particular the Ministry of Power. Again, if you understand that most of the gas that will be developed in the country will be for the power market, not exclusively, of course, because they also demand for gas in the agronomy, like fertilizers, gas for methanol, gas for so many other things. But primarily, the main market will be power. So we must also, relate with the Ministry of Power to ensure that, there's some level of understanding as we interface, right, around the need to ensure that these entrepreneurs are able to have access in terms of the market to some of the stranded power plants, some of which are still owned, by the government.
So when will the final document be ready?
Almost like a multiple role to play in there.
So when will the final document be ready, and will it complement or differ from the 7 big wins?
It won't differ at all from 7 big wins, because if you look at 7 big wins well, and you have a chance to read those documents, you find that a lot of the detail behind the 7 big wins actually come from these policies, these draft policies. There's some sort of consistency between that. The 7 big is basically a roadmap as to how we ensure that we develop the sector. The policies contain the detail. So you won't see any dissonance in there, definitely. In terms of when the policy is ready, we're going to spend the next few days taking on board a number of the very useful comments that we received in the last few days from industry on board, and we will present the final documents to the Federal Executive Council in the coming week. Of course, there's a process within the FEC, and once the FEC goes through the documents and then approves, which we hope will be at some point before the end of the year, then you can look forward to seeing a couple of policy instruments that are actually gazetted. So once the gazette is done, which we expect will be in the early part of the coming year, then you can be sure that the government of Nigeria has issued policies in respect of its petroleum sector, which any investor, right, can hold his hand and says, this is your policy as I understand it. This is the basis of which I've come to your country to make an investment. Also, anyone in government can say, this is our policy, and this is how we want to drive the sector. So basically, so the document actually works for everybody, really. That's the whole idea.
In the coming days, we'll keep our eye on that particular developing story. But Bite Adeniji, Senior Technical Advisor, Upstream and Gas to the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, thank you so much for joining me on the program and, of course, shedding more light on those issues. Business Morning continues after now. Stay with us.